The Years Between was created by the writing team for Starsiege 2845 to document the events between the end of the Starsiege in 2832 up to the beginning of the chase when Starsiege 2845 takes place. Each year in the series comprises brief summaries for events of historical significance that help to shape the world, and boy do they do that here. While SS-2845 is generally considered non-canon by the fandom, it did have Blake Hutchins, the main writer for Starsiege, working with the mod's own writing team to develop the events between the two games, so take from that what you will. Also, due to the incredibly large scope of the Years Between, this one is mostly going to be static shots of concept art, with occasional 3D rendered turnarounds of the various vehicles that would have been in the game. We'll be back to the usual fare in the next video, which seems increasingly likely that it'll be a homeworld video. With that aside, let us begin. 2832. Promethean cybrids begin to seek out and eradicate metagen units instead of merely redacting them. First appearance of Darwin's forged thinking among human resistance on Mars. The philosophy views the cybrids as God's whetstone, intended to sharpen humanity. It melds fragments of Nietzschean writing left over from the devastation with Hunterite creeds drawn from the New Tellurian Bible. Human plague dog strategy succeeds in spreading erratic behaviors among cybrids. Prometheus orders the destruction of all flawed units. By sheer good fortune, Alliance forces intercept a series of cybrid military intelligence secrets and high-level access codes. Eventually, these reveal the lair of Prometheus. Exemplar sect communications intercepted during this time include lengthy discussion of an entity named Null B. Fast clone Bioderm troopers enter the field as shock troops. They achieve little success, but their mass-produced presence adds a morale boost to beleaguered human forces on Earth. Death of Herebeck and destruction of Prometheus occurs on Pluto. Massive cybrid fusion charges destroy Pluto shortly thereafter. Emperor Petricin is killed after elite cybrid units break through the defenses at Nova Alexandria. Death of Prometheus throws cybrid chain of command into utter confusion. Metagens now openly battle Prometheans and sea ships to leave the conflict. 2833. Cybrid grounded naval forces in the outer system fall back to positions around Saturn and Neptune, as Alliance troops secure their hold on the Jovian satellites. Battle for China begins. Entrenched human forces in Siberia and Manchuria initiate a massive counterattack against disorganized cybrids that meets with limited success. Absence of Prometheus's guidance takes an increasing toll on the cybrid chain of command. Infighting among cybrid units is particularly fierce on Earth and Mars, where cybrid military effectiveness in many regions falls to less than half of what it had been at the start of the conflict. Alliance forces using Titan as their primary staging area muster a relief effort for Earth led by Kanan Weathers. A second, smaller task force is arrayed to harass cybrid units orbiting Saturn, and to defend Titan in case of a renewed assault. Dust rats on Mars begin staging raids to harass their machine oppressors. Veterans of the last Mars siege are quick to note that the cybrids do far more damage to themselves than the ill-equipped insurgents. Nevertheless, Martian morale is bolstered and attacks on cybrid command and control facilities continue. Imperial Knights of the Furious Stars Order strike at already weakened cybrid lines just outside the Denver metro zone. Led by Knight Captain Kieran Mace, they claim a 5-for-1 rate of attrition and establish a stable rallying point for surviving TDF forces in the North American prefecture. 2834. Imperial Navy engineers discover how to use cache tech to effectively reduce the mass of the Alliance ships under Kanan's command. This advance permits immensely greater long-term acceleration with the same reaction mass use and cuts interplanetary transit time by almost 99%. Cache tech modifications are made en route, and strategic timetables are advanced sharply, the entire battle group going to high alert as tech crews race around the clock to prepare vehicles for battle. Passing through the asteroid belt en route to Earth, Alliance forces under the command of Kanan encounter a small contingent of TDF ships in hiding, their crews unaware of the fall of Prometheus. The fleet diverts long patrol gunship ISS Sacagawea to take on survivors. The ships are in disrepair and are scuttled after being scavenged for parts. Burning hard, Sacagawea is able to catch the rest of the fleet within a week and resume her place in formation. During a reconnaissance patrol near Mercury, Cloak-equipped TDF destroyer Tuareg detects unusual movement among Cybrid forces on the planetary surface. The Tuareg maintains remote surveillance of the activities and reports mass transfer of Cybrid forces to ships in orbit. Swinging out from behind the shadow of Luna, the Allied fleet under Kanan stages a daring assault against Cybrid flotillas in station keeping at L4 and L5. The Cybrid ships are uncharacteristically slow to respond, and the initial sally by TDF interceptor flights sows devastation among them. Fusion torpedoes launched by the 38th Penetration Wing, aka the Silver Wolves, succeed in detonating the reactor core of the Cybrid super dreadnought codenamed Grendel. Most of the Silver Wolves perish in the assault. Cybrid dreadnoughts Tyrant and Asmodeus also fall to TDF attacks. The Cybrid carrier Tiamat almost escapes, but the TDF destroyer Unsung sacrifices itself in a suicidal collision that leaves the immense Cybrid vessel a flaming hulk. The Chaos provides cover for Kanan's dropships to launch a halo operation over Nova Alexandria. Cybrid naval forces fragment, some ships burning on out-system vectors, others rallying to defend against the human attackers. While Hercs and aerospace fighters battle for a planet-side foothold on Mother Earth, control of the Lagrange points in low orbit remains contested for 3 months before the Alliance prevails. Cybrid forces withdraw from Nova Alexandria and form a perimeter around the city. The Imperial Palace is left in ruins, along with the greater part of the royal city. A commando team from the Rose Azure Order of Knights slips through Cybrid sentries and examines the charred remains of the Emperor's womb coach. Following the team's report, Imperial Command abandons any hope of finding Peterson's remains, and the Emperor is listed among the dead. Surviving civilian population of Luna taking refuge in the mines report confusion among Cybrid vehicles. Darkside commandos sabotage Cybrid sensor stations with a strain of Plague Dog virus. Luna's Cybrid garrison responds with a series of erratic forays that ultimately results in destruction of its own sensor network. Tunnel-running dust rats increase guerrilla assaults on Cybrid bases in Tharsis, Valles, and Xanthe regions. A dust storm of immense proportions prevents significant action in the east and south. Cybrid forces in Arabia, Noachis, and Syrtis Tyr provinces suffer severe and persistent mechanical problems, as the superfine grain dust proves a deadly enemy to Cybrid joint mechanisms and optical arrays. An intense torpedo bombardment from capital ships ISS Crimson Star, ISS Hood, and ISS Ancient Glory in low Earth orbit destroys a heavily fortified Cybrid vehicle production facility. Civilian losses are high due to inaccurate reports of human shield numbers the Cybrids have placed in the area. 2835. Imperial Navy regroups in Earth orbit. Surviving ships from across the inner system trickle in as word of Alliance victory over the skies of Terra Mater spreads. Naval engineers refit as much of the fleet as possible with the gravitic drive technology developed by Kanan's Cash Tech scientists while en route to Earth. The Second Battle of Nova Alexandria. Imperial Knights and colonial forces led by Kanan Weather succeed in breaking the Cybrid siege of the Imperial seat. Hercs piloted by Blood Eagle veterans distinguish themselves by isolating and destroying the notorious Cybrid hunter-killer group, codenamed Scorpio. Imperial Knight Colossa Jaguar Unalba leads the final charge. Insurgent forces in the North American prefecture make dramatic gains against Cybrid forces all along the Rocky Mountain Range and into the Great Plains, though both coasts of the continent remain firmly under Cybrid control. Emperor Kanan is inaugurated as the second emperor of the Great Human Empire amid bittersweet celebrations in Nova Alexandria. He is wounded shortly after the ceremony when one of his surviving sons turns out to be a Trojan horse. Given an enormous edge from their new drive technology, small strike forces of the Imperial Navy begin to make tremendous gains against Cybrid vessels. Cybrid ability to reinforce or reallocate ground forces is hampered throughout the inner system. The Cybrid gunnery programs adapt quickly, however, and the human edge lessens, though it retains a clear superiority over Cybrid capabilities. A TDF relief effort is dispatched to Mars. Dust Rats and Imperial Knights working together break the fortifications of the primary Cybrid bases in Vallis and Noakim regions. Renowned Knight Captain Titus Hangman Thal Euros is slain, as well as a host of TDF regulars and countless Martian fighters. Unalba gives a curt funeral speech for Thal Euros, concluding his rival was one of humanity's great heroes. concluding with, "But I wish I had the pleasure of killing him myself." The battle for Greater China turns dramatically in humanity's favor as Emperor Kanan dispatches the bulk of Imperial aerospace assets to seize control of the skies over Asia. Imperial domination of the air and the lack of off-world resupply hobbles Cybrid forces throughout the continent. Human shields are redeployed into the Cybrid slave factories to bolster production. Heroic resistance in the factories themselves renders this strategy useless by year's end. 2836. Human factories on Earth begin to produce cash-tech weapons in significant numbers. As the new arms are deployed in the Chinese and Indian combat theaters, initial underestimation of their firepower results in unexpectedly high friendly fire casualties. The Xavier gravitic envelope drive revolutionizes humanity's projection of force across interplanetary distances. The TDF launches a food and munitions relief effort for Mars. The ships arrive in Martian orbit mere days after leaving low Earth orbit. A salvo of XGE-mounted missiles launched at the midpoint of the journey shreds Cybrid orbital defenses. Though the cost of producing these missiles with a dwindling store of gravitic components is astronomical, the TDF owns Martian space almost immediately. Alliance sensor boats patrolling the asteroid belt detect a hidden Cybrid ore processing and refinement facility. A task force of XGE-equipped destroyers and corvettes is dispatched to destroy this objective. As the ships begin the assault, the Cybrids detonate nearby asteroid NX-232 with horrifically precise timing. The huge blast causes a meteor tsunami to rip through the task force, damaging many ships. In the ensuing confusion, the ISS Hellfire Rose reports attack by a Cybrid boarding party. The ship's captain blows his fusion reactors to prevent capture of the Rose's XGE drive, and the rest of the task force falls back to Mars. Cybrid forces in South America venture north to suppress human insurgents in the central plains of North America and the northwestern shed of the Mississippi River Valley. The reinforced Cybrid legions retake Denver and devastate the furious stars after a pitched battle. An alarming number of Trojan horses among the Star's officer corps plays a significant role in making sure almost no one in the Order survives. The Blood Eagle immediately begin counterinsurgency operations to purge their own ranks of Trojan horse infiltrators. Their numbers and supplies dwindling under the onslaught of human aerospace domination, Cybrids in Siberia carry out a massive synchronized self-destruct sequence that releases radioactive fallout into Mongolia, Central Asia, and Western China. When embattled Cybrid defenders in Beijing and Shanghai prepare to follow suit, concentrated volleys of cash-tech-enhanced EMP warheads prevent them from succeeding. TDF forces capture a large number of lobotomized Cybrid pilot forms, and use them as ashtrays and latrines. Kanan declares victory in China. Survivors in Eastern and Southern Asia begin to emerge from bunkers and underground tunnel warrens en masse. As celebrations begin in Beijing, TDF shunts its forces to the Mediterranean for an assault on Europe. The 3rd Colonial Rangers land in the ruins of Tharsis City and fight a vicious building-to-building battle against entrenched Cybrid forces. Colonel Verity Vargas leads her Red Hawk Raiders to intercept a Cybrid adjudicator force en route to destroy a hidden township of the Resistance that harbored the Children of Mars. Her desperate victory against superior numbers earns her the Martian Cross and the instant devotion of every dust rat in the solar system. Led by the battle cruiser ISS Hood, TDF-Q ships, concealed in the hulls of Cybrid vessels, successfully assault the Cybrid refinery facility in the asteroid belt. This time, the task force surprises the Cybrid ships defending the operation, firing off a series of magnetically shaped wide-angle EMP blasts to disable them. Following a short, sharp battle, the processing facilities are captured intact. They span several large ore-rich asteroids, all tethered to an immense superstructure construction facility. After the TDF takes on as much ore and equipment as they can carry, one of the Cybrid hulks is packed with fusion warheads and remotely detonated in the heart of the base. Venusian survivor Hermit Harkin finally stops transmitting his defiant poems after miraculously evading the Cybrids on Venus for 6 years. From the context of his last message, he's presumed to have committed suicide as an alternative to starvation or capture. His real name and identity remain a mystery, though historians and literary scholars later write reams of speculative papers on the subject. 2837. Imperial scientist Antonin Ryu develops the first gravitic pinch drive based on research enabled by XGE technology. This breakthrough cuts interplanetary travel time even more dramatically. It makes true extrasolar exploration possible, but production difficulty together with massive energy and space requirements hinder deployment of the technology. Widespread infighting breaks out among cybrid units in Europe as they compete with one another for scarce energy and spare parts. Seizing the window of opportunity, TDF forces mustered near the Black Sea launch a massive offensive that succeeds in evicting the machines from Eastern Europe. The Order of the Blood Eagle and a number of other Alliance units are dispatched to the North American theater as reinforcements for TDF forces struggling to hold on to the Colorado front. The Knights exhibit a pattern of aberrant, disturbing behavior. Alliance officers report brutal hazing of regular troops and hint at far worse, but the Order's presence makes the difference. The Cybrid counteroffensive is halted. Imperial Navy destroyers ISS Glorious Dragon and ISS Spinnaker are the first ships outfitted with Ryu pinch drives. Though the new drive's efficiency is greatly reduced within the solar system's gravity well, the ships gain the capability to reach the outer planets in hours rather than weeks. Carrying both Ryu pinch and XGE drives, the two destroyers seek out and destroy Cybrid factory ships lurking in the outer orbits that had previously proven impossible to track down. Submersible carriers ferry TDF's elite Neptune division in an attack against deep-sea Cybrid bases in the South Pacific. Using Scarab technology in the new implosion warheads, Neptune's troops achieve swift initial success. However, the Cybrids deploy a gigantic warform near the islands of Vanuatu that destroys one carrier and badly damages two others. Shaken TDF naval forces withdraw before the onslaught of this new foe, codenamed Kraken, following reports from awed eyewitnesses. Colossa Unalba suffers horrifying injuries during an assault on a Cybrid stronghold in Xanthi province on Mars. The damage to his body cannot be regenerated properly. He is confined to a life support biotank with little hope of full recovery. As a result, Unalba uses a VR interface to continue piloting Hercs and commanding forces in the field, against the advice of his physicians, who warn of possible permanent neurological damage. TDF forces fight a seesaw battle across the Italian peninsula. Heretofore spared the ravages of the Earthsieges, Rome is devastated as a series of Cybrid retaliatory strikes rip through the historic city center. Kanan reluctantly diverts some of his strength to protect the city of Florence, declaring, "Our heritage cannot be left unshielded if we are to have a future." As Mercury's orbit brings the innermost planet around the sun closer to Earth, Cybrid vessels are detected burning on an outsystem vector. Led by Rear Admiral Hidei Nagashima, XGE-equipped TDF ships of the Tengu Dog Squadron intercept the Cybrid formation less than an AU from Mercury. Nagashima places derelict vessels that emit false signals in the Cybrid's path. When the ships alter course to intercept the hulks, Nagashima detonates massive EMP warheads to screen an assault by fast gunships, missile boats, and turncoat missiles piloted by recompiled Cybrid brains. Over the next 2 hours, the bulk of the Cybrid force is obliterated. The remnants scatter in all directions. Kraken surfaces and destroys a convoy of food supply ships en route for Tokyo. When the carnage is complete, the Cybrid monster slips back beneath the waves, impervious to the barrage of lasers and torpedo fire directed at it by TDF Aerosub escorts. Emperor Kanan reiterates that Cybrids are mere objects under the law, not persons. As such, they do not fall under the ancient standards of the Geneva Convention or any other statute, custom, or constitutional provision that purports to grant rights to prisoners of war. Captured Cybrids are spirited behind the black metaplaz walls of the newly established Imperial Security Protectorate in Nova Alexandria, where their neurologics are decompiled line by painstaking line. After a spring and summer of fierce fighting around the Denver and Greater Omaha metro zones, the North American front bogs down under fierce blizzards. Though Hercs are able to continue normal operations, Cybrids suffer from a lack of replacement parts, and humans from reduced food supplies. Scavenger activity occurs on both sides. Rumors circulate accusing the Blood Eagle of cannibalism, but these are never substantiated. In a radical departure from previous non-ecocidal strategy, Cybrids maneuver a large meteor to collide with Mother Earth. The sacrifice of Glorious Dragon and many heroic TDF fighter pilots diverts the meteor from its intended target of the North American plains and into the Pacific Ocean. Tsunamis devastate the west coast of the North American prefecture and most of Japan. and the shockwave obliterates several undersea colonies. Earth's weather patterns are sharply impacted for years. 2838. In an epic, month-long battle that runs up and down the slopes of Olympus Mons, Colonel Verity Vargas defeats the last major cybrid force on the Red Planet. Vargas is killed in the final assault, and is subsequently enshrined as the greatest Martian war hero after Beck's Storm, becoming known as the victor of the Battle of the Long Slope, the third Battle of Olympus. The surviving Red Hawk Raiders paint their Hercs black in her memory. Kraken attacks Tokyo Harbor, breaching the partially rebuilt perimeter wall and launching salvos of low-payload, high-radiation warheads into the heart of the city. A furious counterattack by Knights of the Rising Earth Order repels the monstrous war form, despite inflicting only light damage. Virtually the entire civilian populace dies of radiation poisoning over the ensuing 2 months. Kanan devotes the majority of TDF naval assets to hunt down this cybrid foe, but the year runs out with Kraken still at large. A large cybrid force is defeated at the foot of the Alps in northern Italy, effectively breaking cybrid power in Europe. Amid unconfirmed reports of cybrid pilot forms attempting to surrender, TDF troops unleash the frustration and grief of years of war in a destructive rampage. A handful of cybrids are captured. TDF tanks and Hercs liberating Zurich sport offline cybrid pilot forms as hood ornaments. Cloned bioderms with memory implants become a valuable asset to bolster TDF infantry operations. Though they are less effective at independent tactical thinking, they function reasonably well under close direction of experienced officers. Kanan deploys them en masse to the South American and African theaters, where, absorbing the brunt of cybrid attempts to break the surging human offensives, they die like flies. Ex-Colonial Ranger Sergeant Rihanna Yashida Jones runs for mayor of Tharsis City on the Free Mars Party ticket. Despite revelations of a history of disciplinary problems during her service, and the use of colorful expressions in her speeches, she wins by a landslide. Emperor Kanan dedicates a memorial to Solomon Peterson, now widely credited among survivors on Earth as having prepared humanity to survive the cybrid onslaught. During the dedication speech, Kanan makes no bleak reference to his younger brother being more Peterson's son than a scion of the Weathers. At this moment, subtle cues in Kanan's face and voice tone hint at what puzzled analysts interpret as suppressed outrage. It proves to be the last occasion on which Kanan publicly mentions Peterson's name. Cybrids in South America, Africa, and the Pacific Rim begin to withdraw to strongholds in Antarctica as human forces push southward on both sides of the globe. Reinforced by freshly trained pilots gleaned from survivors in Asia and the Middle East, and enjoying near total global air superiority, TDF regulars and Imperial Knights make dramatic inroads all across the southern hemisphere. Long patrol sensor buoys detect a cybrid fleet burning for Titan from a staging area outside the orbit of Neptune. Imperial Naval Command dispatches ISS Spinnaker to intercept and harass the cybrids while XGE-equipped ships rush to reinforce Titan. The cybrid forces, harried by hit-and-run attacks by the Spinnaker, arrive to find Titan well defended. After a brief, indecisive encounter, the machines break off and retreat, dumping swarms of remote missiles in their wake, all armed with nuclear warheads. After one of these destroys the corvette Kali's 7th Blade, Imperial Naval Command calls off pursuit. Emperor Kanan attends a briefing at L4 on the battleship ISS Royal Eminence. Alliance admirals report that resources and men and machines run too thin for serious outsystem pursuit of cybrids. Kanan reluctantly issues instructions for defensive repositioning of fleet assets, but swears there will never be another Earthsiege. The First Church of the Masters is established amid the reconstruction of Tharsis City. This group believes the cache itself is proof of God's existence. Many other cults spring up as a battle-scarred humanity seeks solace in mysticism. Imperial Command assembles a small fleet to investigate the situation at Venus. For political reasons, the operation is dubbed a rescue expedition, even though no reasonable person expects to find a living soul on Venus. Thousands of Venusians transfer to Operation Mercy's shore. Newsnet somberly calls it the Venusian Homecoming. It departs Earth orbit without fanfare. Led by the heroics of a previously obscure TDF survivor of the Denver fighting in North America, TDF Hercs break the Cybrid's defenses in Denver and destroy the Glitch's command center. Cybrid resistance crumbles, and TDF and Blood Eagle forces pursue and eradicate the remnants of the North American Cybrid presence. The hero of the hour is Michael Church, a heretofore undistinguished veteran of the Alliance. Eyewitnesses describe how he piloted his Emancipator unscathed through withering enemy fire that left the rest of his squad dead and dying. The Blood Eagle offered to elevate Church into their ranks on the spot. His curt refusal, broadcast on Newsnet across human-occupied space, wins him immortality. The Long Patrol is fully reconstituted as an elite task force, with Eskandani stationed on Titan serving as its home port. Admiral Hide Tengu Nagashima takes command, infusing the Long Patrol with trickster strategies and relaxing the Imperial Navy's spit-and-polish culture in favor of independent thinking that gets the job done. Liberation fever sets in on Earth and Mars as people begin to glimpse the end of the conflict and the prospects of a peaceful future. TDF is forced to declare martial law in several regions as citizen jubilation threatens to grow wildly out of control. In Sydney, a mob lynches a man wrongfully thought to be a Trojan horse. 2839. On Earth, Cybrid forces continue to fall back in North America and Antarctica, the only two major Cybrid footholds remaining on Earth. Many Cybrid units fall because of malfunction or lack of proper maintenance rather than human fire. Deep in the Pacific Ocean, TDF sonar probes detect a large, unidentified mass moving toward the west coast of North America at supercavitating speed. It successfully breaches the naval perimeter near Hawaii and then diverts its course north, toward the Seattle-Vancouver metro zone. Concluding the bogey is Kraken, Imperial Navy deep-sea assets scramble to intercept, but fail. Cybrid forces in the North American theater break through human lines along a 200-mile front in the North American prefecture province of Montana, Columbia, throwing human forces on the defensive. They surge north and west toward CVAM and its reconstructed spaceports. ISS Spinnaker leads a fleet of Xavier Ryu drive ships against a Cybrid naval formation detected near Oberon, in what the Imperial Navy classifies as a defensive operation. The fleet is ultimately victorious, but not before garbled transmissions from Spinnaker report a torpedo hit near the main power plant. An instant later, sensor screens pick up a massive explosion from the famed ship's location, and then nothing. Cybrids approaching CVAM encircle an outnumbered Alliance force of patchwork colonial units, mostly battle-fatigued Martian veterans. The Alliance captain is an ex-rebel named Hunter Otobi. Despite harsh weather conditions, Otobi rallies his soldiers and holds off the Cybrids long enough for the TDF to regroup and counterattack. As a result, Cybrid momentum is broken in North America. Kraken breaks through the seawall and enters Puget Sound, attacking the Seattle-Vancouver greater metroplex from within. Knights led by Artemis Deathwish Chenlu counterattack with cache weaponry and an experimental gravitic implosion torpedo. Casualties are high. Chenlu pilots the craft carrying the torpedo straight into Kraken, sacrificing herself and causing a fatal breach in its armor. Imperial Knights and Imperial Navy aerosubs savage the monstrous warform in a running 3-day pursuit before it finally perishes in a massive explosion. On Venus, Operation Mercy Shore succeeds in clearing the planet of its few remaining Cybrids. A heartbreaking reconstruction begins as scarab-suited laborers excavate the ruins of arcologies, outposts, and caravans. Venusian poets come to call this time the Grieving. Their devastating holofilms and commentaries quickly spread the tragedy of Venus throughout human space. Hysteria born of liberation fever paralyzes TDF operations throughout the North American prefecture. Guerrilla resistance survivors begin to emerge from their hidden bunkers and bases. Slaves are freed from Cybrid factories. Recognizing the need to maintain order, Kanan reestablishes the Imperial Police by transferring selected TDF units to new duty. The Alliance begins to permit colonial troops to muster out and return to their homes. Victory celebrations are frequently cut short in order to facilitate leave-taking. Many interplanetary marriages take place. One such is Imperial Knight Oliphant Raja Praldar Singh, who marries a Venusian woman. Artemis Chenlu's final haiku, calmly delivered over the radio during her famous last run against Kraken, is adopted as the catchphrase for Imperial heroism. In the years to come, she is enshrined as a Buddhist saint. Martian pilots still serving with TDF forces on Earth return home to fanfare and celebration. The first Martian planetary defense forces are established under the command of decorated war hero Hunter Atobi. General Atobi reluctantly takes up the charge and founds the first Tharsis Dragoons from survivors of the Mars siege and returning Martian veterans. Rioting breaks out in Hong Kong and New Rotterdam over distribution of food rations. Hundreds perish as Imperial police rein in the chaos. Autopsies later reveal the presence of Trojan horse units among the dead. Fear and suspicion set in throughout the Empire. Authorities enact rigorous biometric identification procedures as humanity attempts to weed out remaining infiltration units on Earth. TDF transfers its forces from mop-up operations in Africa, Europe, and South America to the North American theater. Alliance hunting missions outside Denver, Geerling District, and along the eastern seaboard yield huge successes. This overwhelming application of force following the years earlier victories in Seattle, Vancouver, crushes the cybrid presence in the North American prefecture. Kanan declares the renewal of the Empire and victory in the Third Earthsiege. In later speeches, he drops the use of Earthsiege for the term Starsiege, desiring to encompass the joint struggle of all human colonies alongside Earth. 2840. Final enclaves of cybrid forces on Earth are eradicated. Cybrid forces in Antarctica make no attempts to flee the planet, but fight to the very last, employing self-destruct tactics whenever possible, reaping carnage among the enemy. Directed by Sword General Letha Fairchild, waves of Bioderm attackers supported by Imperial Knights overwhelm the last cybrids in a massive frontal assault. Mother Earth is free once more. Long patrol vessels lurking outside the orbit of Saturn report signs of substantial cybrid fleet movement near Uranus. The numbers indicate a far greater number of ships than Imperial intelligence estimates had provided for. Alarmed, the Imperial Navy dispatches a task force to Titan to guard against a possible offensive. Deeply moved by the devastation wrought on Venus, Imperial Knight Oliphant Praldar Singh resigns his commission and takes up permanent residence in the devastated colony. His Venusian wife at his side, he devotes himself to reconstruction efforts with what observers call religious fervor. Imperial Navy establishes a new orbital shipyard dubbed Phoenix Station at Earth Luna L5. In a moving speech that takes on the cadence of prayer, Kanan dedicates it to all the ships and spacers lost in the Starsiege, ending with the simple phrase, "May we rise again." Mop-up operations continue to eradicate the remaining pockets of cybrid presence on Earth and Mars. As the full import of victory sinks in, Liberation Fever sparks riotous celebrations across human space, notable for their spontaneous violence and complete lack of restraint. Imperial police trying to regain control are swept up in the hysteria. Within the next year, a huge number of pregnancies strains obstetrics facilities and food supply capacity. Long Patrol Deep Scout ISS Ranger reports signs of a massive naval engagement occurring beyond the ghost orbit of Pluto. Imperial Naval Command reports no vessels operating in that region and orders Ranger to investigate. The next day, Eskandani Station receives what turns out to be the last message from Ranger. Badly garbled, the only intelligible portion is, "Enough, this is critical. Back to... coming around. No, wait. Punch the..." End transmission. Venusians lay foundations of new arcology dubbed La Esperanza. In addition to enacting strict measures to try to gain control over Liberation Fever, the Imperial government puts policies in place to encourage the emerging baby boom. Military planners quietly incorporate the skyrocketing birth rate into future troop strength projections. Verity and Beck became the most popular baby names on Mars. Fierce winter storms sweep across North America. Thousands die of starvation and exposure, as a parts shortage grounds many airships. Aerospace drops bring relief to several groups of refugees, but for others, the supplies come too little, too late. Departing from the defensive doctrine established in recent years, Kanan orders construction of a pursuit armada to hunt down cybrids beyond the solar system. In a major speech transmitted throughout human space, he declares, "Like the ancient gods and spirits of the hunt, we will pursue our foe without mercy, without hesitation, without fear. Fly though it may, the cybrid cannot escape our justice." Tharsis Mayor Rihanna Yashida Jones gives birth to a son. The father is unknown. Severely brain damaged, the child is diagnosed with irreparable genetic damage and given no more than a year to live. As a symbol of Imperial colonial cooperation, 2 new flagships are commissioned for the Pursuit Armada. One is christened the ISS Ambrose Geerling, and the other, the FCV Verity Vargas. 2841. Liberation fever diminishes in scale and frequency as the peace settles across human space. Industry begins to shift from war production toward consumer goods. A thriving black market interferes with the economic recovery, however, and illegal narcotics flood the cities. Unprecedented amity exists between Earth and her colonies. On Mars, the Imperial presence is quietly withdrawn, but the Alliance headquarters remains with a small interworld garrison, situated on the old battleground of Carter Flats. The leader of the Martian contingent is the grizzled commander Joachim Sax Saxon, one-time right-hand man to the legendary Beck Storm. His aide-de-camp is the son of his old friend Hunter Atobi. Fueled by the testimony of TDF survivors, highly publicized court-martials begin, focusing on accusations of atrocities committed by Blood Eagle Knights during the Battle of Denver. Though many Knights are acquitted, some are not, and the trials leave a bad taste with the public. Kanan himself is said to have washed his hands of the controversial order. Bulk food shipments become one of the most sought-after underground commodities. Major agricultural shipments require heavily armored and escorted convoys. Record numbers of births include record numbers of severe birth defects, as the legacy of the Starsiege reaches the next generation. Imperial doctors begin to focus research efforts on teratogen detection and genetic therapy. Suicide rates spike as devastated parents try to cope with the continuing presence of the cybrid horror. War hero Colossa Unalba gives a stern but stirring speech to the reconstituted Imperial Senate, appearing by virtual projection as his ruined body is still confined to a biotank. He calls for a renewal of humanity's warrior spirit and demands that our hands not stray far from the sword. People traumatized by years of apocalyptic war demonstrate a range of psychological scars ranging from severe PTSD to running amok. Suicide rates remain abnormally high. At the height of the Blood Eagle trials, TDF veteran Michael Church, the hero of Denver, provides testimony that convicts 3 senior officers of the infamous order. One is Knight Captain Ruby Hokanson Lee, aka Razorfire. After the verdicts, Church goes into seclusion. On Venus, Oliphant Praldar Singh is elected first citizen of the Reconstruction. He commissions the Oberwinder Regulars as the first official sovereign defense force of Venus. Rumors begin to circulate among reactionary elements on Earth that another conflict with the colonies may be inevitable. Ethan Yoshida Jones dies in a Tharsis hospital, his tissues devoured by fast-growing systemic tumors. Rihanna falls into a severe depression. By the end of the year, it becomes obvious she has developed a substantial drinking problem. First Church of the Masters takes hold on Earth as well as Mars. Kanan expresses his personal disapproval, but takes no steps to hinder the spread of the new religion. 624 Hector, a Trojan planetoid at Jupiter's L4 point, explodes in a massive conflagration visible from Earth. The explosion scatters a cloud of asteroids and debris across the Jovian orbital path. Across human space, fears are awakened of another ecocidal attack by the cybrids. The Long Patrol dispatches the ISS Crimson Inquisitor to investigate. Kanan assigns 2 newly formed Imperial Knight Orders to the Pursuit Armada, the Fireborn and Adamant Storm. The TDF attaches its 1st Imperial Starborn Division, and the Colonials offer the 3rd Colonial Rangers, the most decorated unit of the Starsiege after the Blood Eagle and the recently formed Tharsis Dragoons. Michael Church's body is discovered in a garbage-strewn alley in Bangkok. 2842. ISS Crimson Inquisitor arrives within sensor range of Jupiter L4 and reports a large cybrid salvage operation underway. She continues to monitor the cybrid activity while the Imperial Navy musters a task force. Long Patrol Deep Scout ISS Vainamonen detects unusual gravitic signatures outside the orbital path of Neptune. Kanan puts the Imperial Navy on Red 6, TDF's highest alert status, after analysis of the gravitic reading shows a pattern consistent with manifested XGE drive fields. The limitations of gravitic detection capability mean only generalized location of XGE vessels can be determined, not vector or acceleration readings. General Letha Fairchild assumes command of TDF in the Orbital Guard. She makes her base of operations on Phoenix Station. Fast draft initiated to cycle all able-bodied people into war effort. 3rd Lieutenant Orlando Konovalov of the TDF pilots an interceptor on a spontaneous sortie against a suspected cybrid incursion near L4. The intruder turns out to be a cybrid spy probe, easily destroyed. Konovalov's cool professionalism during her approach marks her to TDF superiors. Long Patrol scrambles all available ships to establish a sensor picket between the cybrid XGE coordinates and in-system vectors. Priority channels on Gloria cleared for high-level response to the threat. Rumors on the OmniWeb describe an exceptional volume of encrypted transmissions between Imperial Command on Earth and Titan. Antolin Mirador, a clerk at the Rio Luz Bank of Madrid Metroplex, arrested for a horrific murder spree. He claims to be a Trojan horse acting on behalf of the Great Machine God. Tests confirm he suffers from mental illness. He receives a humane execution after judicial inquiry concludes he committed the murders of which he was accused. Task Force Black Denial departs Phoenix Station and vectors for Jupiter at maximum speed. The cybrid salvage operation departs using what the Crimson Inquisitor's crew concludes is XGE technology. Crimson Inquisitor attempts to follow, but a pair of cybrid destroyers peel off to intercept. Outgunned, she falls back and evades, losing the cybrid quarry in the process. Nanophage alarm triggered in Sector 4, Block 7 of Dallas Metro Zone. Blood Eagle strike teams arrive and raze the block within an hour, killing anyone who tries to escape and hunting down those few who exited the building before the Red Knights arrived. At Eskandani Chasm, Admiral Nagashima orders the evacuation of non-essential base personnel into the new bunkers hidden beneath the ethane lakes and frozen oceans of the immediate region. The Long Patrol deploys a host of orbital defense drones over the main base and braces itself for the worst. Imperial Command orders a pair of freshly minted interdictor-class battleships, the ISS Damocles and the ISS Radiant Shield, both equipped with Ryu pinch drives to reinforce Titan. Cybrid threat never materializes. After weeks of tension, Kanan orders Imperial Navy to stand down to Red 1. A month later, he downgrades the alert status to Amber 6. Fast draft halted. Crowds on Earth and Mars spill into the city streets, evincing relief and resentment. Rihanna Yoshida-Jones wins re-election as mayor of Tharsis, campaigning on the Free Mars Party platform and advocating complete independence from imperial regulations. She takes her old emancipator and campaign stops from settlement to settlement, using the video ops it affords her. Despite allegations of raucous behavior in her personal life, she wins by a landslide. Protests erupt over Imperial false alarm. Kanan is portrayed as Chicken Little in demonstrator placards. Fearing another outbreak of liberation fever, Imperial police overreact. Hundreds of protesters are injured, scores killed in cities across the world. Duke Colosso Unalba is summoned to a private audience with the Emperor, at which he appears in person. His biotank floated into Kanan's presence on a gravitic sled derived at great expense from Predator technology. What the two discuss is not recorded, but Unalba's virtual presence thereafter becomes a constant at meetings of the Imperial High Command and TDF's Strategic Planning Directorate. Observers note he also enjoys an unprecedented level of security clearance. Amid the cramped foundations of La Esperanza Arcology on Venus, Ramara Chandler begins writing the Solitude Canticles, a poetic meditation on grief and remembrance. In the years to come, she will be renowned as the first Venusian poet saint. Vargas Military Institute established on Mars. Long Patrol Deep Scout Walkabout vanishes during investigation of one of Pluto's larger fragments. The planetary shard was on an out-system trajectory. Cybrids are presumed responsible for the ship's disappearance. Protest leaders on Earth detained indefinitely. Civil libertarians agitate for their release. Decorated Bioderm veteran Delta 6 lobbies Imperial government for Bioderm clemency, citing Derm casualty rates under command of Letha Fairchild in the Antarctica campaign as punishment enough. He is arrested, but released within the month. Imperial alert status downgraded to Amber 2. Kanan makes speech decrying turmoil and berating those who would embrace the enemy by forgetting what they are. Our history is writ in blood and fire. We do not have the luxury to be soft. Shortly after the Emperor's speech, Rihanna Yoshida Jones gives a speech attacking those who would sacrifice their liberty out of fear, who would sell themselves to dictators for security. That is the greatest disrespect to our dead comrades, to forget why we fought. Martian runs amok at Imperial Consulate, killing 3 before he is brought down. The tragedy elevates tensions between Imperials and colonists. Generation-old memories resurface. Dusters mutter the name of Navarre. Rihanna Yoshida Jones shot by Imperial sympathizer at a rally in Tharsis. 2843. Martians hold a candlelight vigil for Rihanna Yoshida Jones as she clings to life in a Tharsis City hospital. To their surprise, they are joined by a silent contingent of Imperial citizens bearing flowers in the name of the Emperor. Within days, most of Yoshida Jones's old squad mates have rallied to her. Newsnet reports downplay her turbulent personal life. Colonial-Imperial tensions ease. Imperial security forces on Titan uncover a Trojan horse cell operating at Eskandani Station. The cell includes a network of smugglers, Long Patrol communications officers, and Scarab laborers. Security is tightened across the moon as an atmosphere of paranoia infuses the outer colonies. A pale but steady Rihanna Yoshida Jones gives a press conference thanking all her well-wishers and the Emperor. She reiterates the need to avoid the mistakes of the past, saying that, to be human means embracing the risks that go with freedom. We are not cogs in a machine. Knight Captain Sunder Kane of the Blood Eagle leads an Inquisition team to Titan to secure the outer colony against further Trojan horse infestation. The team's presence is controversial among the ice grubs, and Kane's methods are uncompromising. Admiral Nagashima transmits a strongly worded protest to Imperial Command. Imperial census shows human population burgeoning, with record numbers of children being born across the system despite fears of genetic damage from the Starsiege. Fleet shipyards at Phoenix Station begin construction on 5 new Liberation-class colonial frigates. Imperial Command refuses to allow weapons or firing control systems to be installed on location, citing Trojan horse concerns. On Mars, agitators in the Martian Parliament call for independent naval installations to construct and service colonial vessels. Earth's ecosystems show sign of recovery after the years of devastating war. Emperor Kanan dedicates the monument to the Battle of Denver amid a field of wildflowers. Elections are held for the Martian Parliament. The Free Mars Party, headed by Rihanna Yoshida Jones, prevails, and Yoshida Jones takes office as the first Speaker of Mars. Newsnet posts a story linking Michael Church's death to the Blood Eagle. Though well documented, the evidence cited consists of oral testimony from unidentified witnesses. The scandal gets attention, but falls into the vast sea of conspiracy theory already surrounding the Blood Eagle. Escorted by bodyguards, Francisco Navarre, son of former Imperial Governor Ernesto Navarre, enrolls in the Vargas Military Institute on Mars. Despite suffering persecution from his classmates, his scores place him at the top of his class. Riots break out on Titan following widespread circulation of incendiary rumors that the Long Patrol is infested with Trojan horses. Some stories accuse Admiral Nagashima himself of being a hidden cybrid. Rihanna Yoshida Jones proposes full independence of colonial forces from the Imperial command structure. The Martian Parliament passes the bill before the end of the year. Kanan bans the Church of the Masters from Nova Alexandria. First Citizen Oliphant Praldar Singh calls on Venusian legislators to strike down a bill authorizing cooperation with Martian forces in the construction of a free colonial shipyard to be established at a secret location. After lengthy and heated debate, the bill passes the Venusian Senate despite his opposition. Venusian composer Owain Lee Kant produces the first of his controversial Promethean symphonies, music inspired by algorithmic fragments salvaged from cybrid brains. To quell the rumors about his humanity, Admiral Hidei Nagashima submits to interrogation by the Blood Eagle investigation team. After the questioning is over, he resigns his commission and leaves Titan. Imperial Naval Command makes no move to stop him. Akeem Mathieu, a former naval intelligence officer who infiltrated a rebel smuggling operation during the Starsiege under the alias Mathieu Akimbo, is elevated to the rank of Vice Admiral and given provisional command of the reconstituted 3rd Imperial Fleet. The Imperial Ministry of Health publishes findings of a disturbing correlation between widespread post-traumatic stress disorder and cases of child abuse. Citing fears of a traumatized population, the ministry suggests mandatory medication and therapy for all parents of children under 12. Sporadic food riots break out after a fungus blights a portion of the North American prefecture wheat crop. Fears spread that cybrid taint in the food supply will be another long-running legacy of the Starsiege. 2844. Amidst much pomp and ceremony at the Palace in Nova Alexandria, Duke Colossa Un Alba is graced with the honorary title of Knight Exemplar, the most prestigious award an Imperial Knight can receive. Hidei Nagashima takes up residence on Venus and becomes moderately involved in local politics. He has the vocal support of First Citizen Singh, but is the source of much controversy among the native populace. Imperial police stage a 3-month-long crackdown on black market trade throughout Earth and the inner colonies. Their tactics and behavior are particularly brutal, evoking outrage from civil liberties advocates across the inner system. Underground food and supplies trade is sharply impacted, while narcotics shipments remain curiously unaffected. Newsnet reports Duke Unalba's appointment as general of the Imperial forces attached to the Artemis Pursuit Armada. General Hunter Otobi will command the colonial contingent. The Blood Eagle Inquisition team on Titan stages a surprise raid on a mining facility deep in the Eskandani Chasm. The facility, its workers, and most of the strike team are consumed in a massive explosion that is felt as far away as Hugin's station. Knight Captain Sunder Kane, after reviewing data of the incident, declares the Blood Eagle mission on Titan complete and returns to Earth without further public explanation. Martian scholar Orestes Bale publishes his landmark biography of Solomon Peterson. The work, entitled Circuits, Flesh and Steel, sparks controversy on Earth due to its highly critical analysis of the former Emperor's life. Vice Admiral Akeem Mathieu is advanced to the rank of Admiral and offered command of the Imperial fleet assigned to the Artemis Armada. He graciously accepts and transfers the ISS Gearling to oversee the final stages of the naval muster. Venusian First Citizen Oliphant Praldar Singh travels to Mars on a diplomatic embassy to meet with Rihanna Yashida Jones. The two discuss colonial economics, agricultural and industrial trade, and military cooperation among other subjects. The visit dominates the Newsnet feeds for weeks as hired analysts and other talking heads speculate on the future of colonial-imperial relations and the establishment of the controversial Free Colonial Forces. A cybrid strike force assaults and captures Kuiper Defense Platform 4, one of 7 newly constructed naval outposts scattered throughout the outer system. Imperial Command orders the Long Patrol to keep tight surveillance of the platform and its companions, but orders no further response. Thal Euro's family stock plummets in value after yearly profit and loss reports show a drastic decrease in their portfolio value, caused in large part by the collapse of several industrial manufacturing firms in which they are heavily invested. Hoping to staunch the sudden outflow of capital from the family's holdings, Julius Thal Euros resigns his position on the Austin Ugari board of directors and reinvests a large portion of his funds into a handful of burgeoning cash tech development corporations. An obscure religious cult claiming to worship the immortal emperor makes the news feeds when one of its members assaults Orestes Bale during a book signing in Capri Station on Mars. At the behest of General Otobi, and with the support of First Citizen Singh, Allied Command offers the admiralty of the 1st Colonial Expeditionary Unit to Hidei Nagashima. Outraged members of the Martian Parliament call on Rihanna Yashida Jones to condemn the choice. She refuses to do so, and with her tacit approval, Nagashima accepts the appointment. Completing the 28-month Vargas Institute program in less than 18 months, Francisco Navarre becomes the highest-rated graduate in the military academy's short history. He is immediately assigned to the 3rd Colonial Rangers and placed under the command of Captain Dawo Otobi. The Imperial Naval muster is completed at Phoenix Station. Led by flagship ISS Gearling, Task Force Ravenous Shield is comprised of 56 naval vessels, including 8 freshly minted interdictor-class battleships. Tharsis Vallis Technologies becomes the first colonial corporation to ever be listed in the Census Conlegium Imperium, the Empire's annual list of top-performing companies. Trade volume on the colonial market skyrockets as speculators shop for other potential success stories. The Gearling and her task force leave Phoenix Station with a host of public vessels carrying reporters and dignitaries in tow. The civilian ships are ordered back to port, but a few smaller vessels shadow the fleet for several days before breaking off. Emperor Kanan's eldest son and heir, Knight Captain Hector Weathers, is killed in action during a mop-up operation on Triton. The 1st Colonial Expeditionary Unit departs Mars orbit. The battle group is scheduled to rendezvous with Task Force Ravenous Shield somewhere in the outer system, at which time the Artemis Armada will be complete. 2845. Emperor Kanan delivers an historic address marking the launch of the Artemis Pursuit Armada. The speech is capped by his dramatic declaration that the chase is on, not some mean spectacle for renown or glory, but the chase, the great effort of our generation that will at last put an end to abomination and purchase our freedom from fear. The chase begins.